Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, it is good afternoon. It's just 12:01, and I'm Karen Curitin. I am the Chief Socialite, social media trainer, social media mentor and coach. And here I am live today. And look, I've got a guest. So welcome, Mark. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too, Karen, as always.
Good. So Mark and I have known each other for a little while because we met in the community of trainers called Trainer Talk. And I mean, I've been a member, I think, for 3 years now. How long have you been in the community?
I think it's probably 1 year more, at least 4 years now. Yeah.
Gosh, and it is quite a unique offering, and in that it is just really a place for trainers, coaches, facilitators to hang out. And we were just saying actually that some people seem to hang around for quite a long time, some people to dip in and out, but it's an interesting environment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of its strengths in a way, is you're not forced to participate in a certain way. You can engage as much or little as you like, get involved as much as you like, and there's such a variety in there. It's not just the same thing happening once in a while. There's a huge variety of things going on, isn't there? So.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. In fact, I was just saying to Mark before we came on live, I was just sitting in on one of the bonus sessions, which was all about SEO and getting yourself on the first page of Google, which is really interesting because we've got so many experts in the group. And I suppose I joined the group because I love training. I love any sort of training, and I love hanging out with other trainers, which is sort of how we connected. So, Mark, your business is called GiraffePad. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about GiraffePad and how it all came about?
How it all came about, yes. So GiraffePad, in a excuse me, in a nutshell, if you like, is a software solution, a learning platform, if you like, that is the culmination of the 25 years or so I've been involved in learning, in a sense. So for the last 20 years, I've been running a training and coaching business, predominantly working around the sort of management, leadership, and coaching arena, if you like, although with a few sort of little minor niches in there as well. And something, as an external training provider, what I always encountered was that vacuum and difficulty of the before and after your sessions. So you could run these amazing sessions with people, but it didn't matter what you tried to set up in advance, how much you engaged with their line managers to connect them and get people motivated and ready, or what you set up to do afterwards. There was always this vacuum around it. So that sort of prompted me. It took me a few years of procrastinating. To put sort of some ideas together, and not being very technical, I wasn't really aware of the journey I would then go on for the last 4 or 5 years of building a platform that could help trainers, especially external facilitators, sort of map out the whole learning journey for their participants rather than just the workshops they do. And that's essentially what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
And I think that's so true, though, isn't it? Because I've gone into organisations, funny enough, less so in the last 2 years. And I used to think, initially, I thought, it's great. I'm just going to go in, do a day's training, and I'm going to go away. And it's great. They pay me. We have a great day. But the truth is, and clearly what you've picked up on, Mark, is that we need to make sure the learning's embedded. I think there's often the risk, and I'm sure this has to be an element of GiraffePad, and I'm sure you're going to tell me, but I used to find that I would show up for a workshop that we'd fully briefed in to the head of HR or the sales director. Half of the delegates didn't know why they were there, what the expected outcome was. And I would spend probably the first 15 minutes getting them on side to say, well, firstly, your company are investing in your personal development. So that's a really good thing. And that is a huge part. And then when you walk away, you're sort of trusting, she says really optimistically, that the line manager is then going to help with embedding the learning.
Yeah, and we know we know the reality of that, and that's no one's at fault at that point. But we know the reality that people leave those sessions and go back into an environment that hasn't changed, with other people that haven't changed, with a lot of work to do, and so all the magic of the workshop dissipates rather rapidly, doesn't it? I think the key to this is there's two parts to this really. There's whether it's a one-off workshop or a program that you're running, there's the program you create as a facilitator with the great workshops, with the content you create. And in a way, you're mapping out the journey that they're going on, but that's the journey they go on whilst they're with you or doing the tasks you send them. The other side to this is the learning journey they go on, which essentially is from the moment they know they're going to start learning something. So their manager says, I'm sending you on this program, to the moment that they aren't consciously practicing or reflecting to be good at that thing. And that's a much longer journey. And as a facilitator, you're not there for very much of that. And it sounds really sort of almost cynical, but I don't think most people are really consciously high-performing learners. So they don't always do the best they can do in their part of the journey. And so one of the things around GiraffePad is to make it a bit easier for the facilitator to build, if you like, the scaffolding around that journey and to build the infrastructure and the nudges that make high-performing learning happen the whole way through, not just while they're with you in the amazing workshop, whether that's virtually or in person, if you like.
And that's the key thing, I suppose. Has GiraffePad changed in the last 2 years?
It's during my life for 5 years. It's evolved hugely. I mean, we did start pre-pandemic, and it was originally designed around where the live sessions were happening would be in-person sessions. Obviously, we had to seamlessly shift rather rapidly into the world of virtual, and it works with both of those. You know, essentially, I think where we've got to, certainly in this country, maybe not everywhere in the world at the moment, but in this country, we've got to the point where most of us are able to do a blended mix now of some in person, some face to face, some virtual. But essentially, which of those you use is more to do with what's required in the learning rather than what's best, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much more than just the live sessions, because, and you'll know this, Karen, is like if you think about the last workshop you ran, the people that really went away and did, made the biggest changes in what they were doing or whatever it was you were covering with them were the ones that were totally self-motivated.
Yeah.
We'd love to say it was all down to our magic and the light bulb moment from and it is. We nudge them and we prompt them and we spark that curiosity, hopefully. But the ones that really make a difference and go and achieve those performance outcomes and smash it out of the park are the ones that are self-motivated. The ones that are passengers, who are passive, who are just turning up to say, right, Karen, tell me all, I'll absorb all your amazing knowledge and it will change my life. Those are the ones that unfortunately don't quite change as much because it needs that self-motivation. And I think that's actually the starting point. If I was to, regardless of GiraffePad, I think there's probably 4 things that are so crucial to that learning journey. And the first one is you have to start with the individual. Before you get them together as a group, before you even, in my ideal world, you'd do this before you even build the program. You would have an individual session with them and you'd focus on 3 things. Firstly, it'd be about motivation and purpose. So many people are told to go on training, aren't they? And they're said to me, my boss says I've got to turn up in this room with Karen on the 4th of July and learn something. I want to know what the motivation is of that individual before they come on that session, before they join the program. What's their purpose? What's their why? Now, if you've got the most self-motivated learner in the world, that's really quick and it's easy enough. Really. If you've not, you've got that whole scale of saying, let's help you find that purpose. Let's find the relevance and why this is going to be so useful for you. Or really, if this is completely misaligned with you and your needs, maybe a gentle nudge back to the business and say, this isn't right for them. And until that motivation is really uncovered, I wouldn't want to move forward to the group programs. The second element would be helping them understand how they learn. Even down to the basics, like the things I think sometimes it's easy for us to take, almost assume will happen. Like they'll go away and practice, they'll go away and reflect, and actually they get busy. There's a million things going on in people's lives. So I'd want to make sure they've thought about how they're going to reflect, how they're going to practice. And then lastly, how are they going to contribute to the group? You know what a good learning group is like, how much they contribute to each other. If they're not prepared and ready to be part of that, because for some that's a bit harder, it doesn't come naturally. And if they haven't thought about how they're going to contribute, I don't want to leave that to an icebreaker at the beginning of the session. I'd get that dealt with right away at the beginning.
Because it is that element, isn't it? When you've got that group, that unknown commodity, and I have sort of a process with people, and you're absolutely right. Best case scenario, you have a pre-training chat, one-to-one with all of the delegates, but it isn't always possible. I did some training last summer with a bunch of engineers. That was a challenge. Let me tell you, that was a challenge. And I'd contacted them all individually and said, can we have a chat on Zoom before I meet you at the end of the month? half of them didn't even want to have the chat.
No.
And those that did were the most closed-mouthed people I've ever had to work with. I've worked with people from lots of different walks of life, lots of different areas, and it's a real challenge. So when you looked at building GiraffePad, how did you, I'm really curious about this actually, and we've known each other, spent a little bit of time together now, but did you have this huge light bulb moment of what it would look like?
Oh, no. And if I'm honest, if I'm really honest, being non-techie, I just thought, well, it's just an app, isn't it? It won't take long to build. Put it together. And also I just thought, once it's built, it'll be done. I don't have to think about it again. This is about 5 years ago. And obviously I've learned a huge amount since then. The starting point was quite simple in its premises, like the before and after bit I wanted to master. But it's evolved. Well, so it's evolved as I've learned from what's possible technically and what our team can build and what we can do. And also, most importantly, what our customers are feeding back to us all the time as to what they need. But also, I think it's forced me to get rid of any complacency and assumptions about learning. And, a lot of facilitators I know, and I know I was in this guise, knew that on our day with a reasonably good group of people, you could do a really, really good job in the room with them or even on the Zoom with them. And so it's sometimes easy to be complacent about that and say, that's my job, to be wonderful there, to sparkle their learning. If the business doesn't support them elsewise, leave them to it. We know it doesn't work. So as I've then forced myself to understand, right, what are the motivations behind learning? What are the nudges that work? What are the things to do? We've tried to weave that into the building. So no, it doesn't look anything like it did 4 years ago. And I'm pretty sure if we speak in a year's time, it'll have evolved again. And when I say doesn't look the same, we're not making it clunky or weird or different every year, but we're adding layers into it to make it more intuitive, more complex, more able to support the learning journey as much as we can.
So you, with GiraffePad, it is particularly for trainers, facilitators, and just out of curiosity, what do they say about using it? I'm just really curious about how they find it.
So a number of things, and they're going to sound like, well, of course, Mark would say this. I think one of the biggest interesting, the majority of our customers who come to us, because we work predominantly with external training providers, facilitators, coaches, rather than the internal teams, is I think the first thing that comes across is they're surprised with how intuitive and easy to use it is, because unfortunately a lot of learning technology has a sort of clunky reputation. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I started this journey with a principle around learning engagement and the focus on the learner and the journey. And I love it when our customers mention that, but actually what a lot of them also talk about is how much time it saves them on admin. And I think a lot of this comes in the last couple of years because people have been doing less face-to-face and more virtual. You can only do shorter sessions. You spread it out into longer journeys, lots more content sharing. They end up sending thousands of emails, and the learners lose those emails. They don't download the video. They don't read the attachments. So this saves them all this time because they've got the chat functionality and it automates the emails to them. So that's actually the interesting learning, because it was never an objective when I set out about time saving. But it's the one that comes up really, really regularly in their feedback. So
I think it's really interesting though, because I think the world of chat training is constantly evolving. And I think being able to use technology must make a massive difference. And I think there's the challenge, I suppose, if you were talking to your future self, what tips would you give yourself to help you become a better facilitator, better trainer when you're going into what sort of tips would you share? I mean, is it using something like this to help it become more engaging?
Well, I think my real belief around technology, because I'm sure in the next 5 years we're going to get blown away by some of the amazing stuff that becomes available to us, is that use the technology to enhance what you do rather than to completely replace yourself. Because I still feel that a great facilitator is a great partner on their journey of learning. In terms of tips for myself, hopefully I never did this, but it would be the first thing I would say is it's not about you. That would be the very first tip I'd say. In other words, it doesn't matter how much you know as a facilitator, how much expertise you got, how much knowledge, how many stories you want to share. It's not about you. It's about the learn. That would be the number one tip. I mean, there's plenty of others I could come up with, but that would be number one.
And it is. I think there's a lot of trainers will use different techniques to engage their audience more. And I suppose my question is how could a trainer use GiraffePad to create better relationships and more engaged learners? How do you think it would help? Say if I was running something and I wanted to bring in something like GiraffePad, how would that work?
Well, what GiraffePad does essentially is it's not revolutionizing the things you can do. It makes it easier for you and the learners to do those things. So if you imagine when you're running a workshop and you're talking about creating a bit of an accountability group to work between sessions, to do the practice sessions, to reflect together, you kind of think, well, I'm just leaving them to organize it via email in the hope they'll do it whilst they're at work. And guess what? You get together on the second workshop and they go, oh, do you know what, Karen? I forgot to do that. Can we do it next time?
Oh,
We all know, we've been through that
no,
experience.
I'm cringing because this happened to me on Thursday with a client who I'm doing some one-to-one training, and I'd said to her boss, I'm going to ask her to do this, and of course it's just her and I, so it's different. But there is that thing, isn't it? If you ask people to do stuff and you have those accountability groups, I suppose it could really help with that.
Well, it makes it easier to organise it. You can create their own space for them within their GiraffePad program. It's got chat functionality, and then they can upload resources and content and videos that may show the practice sessions they've run. So it makes it easier for them to do it in a high quality way rather than we're meeting with Karen in half an hour, quick, let's do our practice session. And all of a sudden it becomes like homework, which we don't want it to feel like. We want it to feel like it's a self-directed, integral part of their learning. You've also got, because rather than, everybody, what people's email inbox is like, it's horrific. You've got a dedicated chat functionality in there, which means you can just drop this little nudge in there, maybe a little image in there, or you can even drop a video into the program of you just asking some quick questions to prompt their thinking as well. So in terms of keeping them engaged, keeping them nudged forward along their journey, it's about making it really easy for both sides of the learning, if you like, to participate in that. So it's not that we've come up with a magical thing you can do to engage people. We've said, you know how to engage people. We're just making it much easier for you to do it and much easier for them to access it. Because I think the minute you make learning a slightly hard to access or organize from a learner's point of view, it demotivates them straight away.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think there's a word that you use there that I'm going to pick up on, because for me, it's about, in fact, I just used this exact phrase earlier today with somebody. We've got to make it easy and straightforward for people. I think learners aren't any different to anybody else in that the attention span's shorter. We take on information and we need bite-sized chunks. We need to be able to find a way to facilitate training that is easier to understand, easy to implement, really straightforward. And if we can as trainers and facilitators, if we can find a way to make that easy. I mean, I know when I've been hosting workshops and things, there is that admin time, I think, is huge. Is that communication. I'm seeing it at the minute because I'm co-organizing an event next Monday. It's an in-person event. It's a business development event. And the communication we've got going backwards and forwards, and then I've got my co-organizer saying, oh, did you send out the dietary requirements information, and did you do this? And we're communicating with people through her email, my email, and I started thinking today, funny enough, thinking about our call, thinking we could have just put all of this stuff into one place.
And there's the other side to that as well, because it's time consuming for you and it's kind of you, but it's actually also, it gets lost amongst everything else for the participants or the attendees, doesn't it? Because they've got a random email over here, and it's, imagine you're joining a virtual session and you can't remember where that email is, and where did you store it, where's that link? So when they actually find it and arrive in the session, they're all flustered and late anyway, rather than arriving for an obvious, well, I know everything that I'm doing with Karen is this in one intuitive learning space. And that's the idea behind it, because you actually want the learning to be challenging, but if you made it hard to find and access, then they switch off straight away.
And that's the thing. And I loved what you said actually about that as trainers, facilitators, we are still going to be needed. Somebody asked me the other day, it was about 2 weeks ago, and said, because we were talking about the avatars for the new ABBA Voyage thing, and we were talking about that, and they're saying, do you think they'll do that with trainers, that they'll end up that they will create clones of you that can and I don't know about you, I think it's a really nice thought to end it on. We engage with human beings, don't we?
Well, the real power of the facilitator is not the performance you put on the stage. It's the moment when you spot amongst your group a slightly confused look on a face, or someone
Mm.
itching to say something, or someone making a comment that is a different angle, and you can be in there and direct the conversation, prompt someone to be involved, draw someone into it. The avatar can't do that because the avatar is presenting based on a recording of what they did previously. I love all that wonderful technology, but I am definitely of the school of thought that the facilitator will always have a role. We'll use the technology to help us, but the
Mm.
facilitator still has a role, 100%.
I think so, and I can see more and more that given I'm seeing this a lot, that there's a lot of hybrid options. A lot of organizations are wanting that, but I think there is so much from what you've said that as a trainer, and I'm connected with a lot of trainers through, funny enough, through Trainer Talk and broader thing. I think that if people haven't explored Giraffe Pad before, I think there's so many potential benefits. It's that time is money thing about saving time, but also about having more engaged, interested learners could make such a huge difference to the success ultimately of the business. I'll often say to people, if you get one new client as a result, because I still occasionally do a bit of sales training, if you get one new client as a result of us working together, what will that mean to your business? And it's the same for trainers, is if we can engage and work with more people more efficiently, having a much stronger outcome. And I think that's the big thing. And just one thing I think that we've never really talked about actually is somebody was going to sign up and say, right, I want to get GiraffePad on board to use for my next, I'm hosting a series of workshops. How long is it as the person who's going to be using it, how easy is it to use?
Well, you sign up via the website. I'd say it'd take you about 10 minutes to really create your account. I mean that the account is created straight away,
Wow.
but things like creating your profile, integrating
Mm.
your Zoom or Eventbrite accounts, adding some of your content and resources. The programs themselves that you build, it's a bit like how long is a piece of string. So if you're running a really, really long, year-long
Mm.
program with 40, 50 interventions, that takes a bit of time to construct because you want to
Mhm.
get it looking great. The beauty of it is, though, is I know we always talk about running bespoke programs, but we know we try to replicate things. So there's cloning functionality in there. That means you can copy stuff over and use it again. So
Fantastic.
it is very, very quick to get up and running. The other thing is, like, as you probably tell from me talking here, is I'm a facilitator at heart. So yes, I run a software business now, but I'm still a facilitator, and we provide a lot of personal hands-on support. So as people get used to building their programs, we're available to be on Zoom calls, talking through ideas, sharing how other people use it, just to get the best possible experience first time.
So here's a last question for you. Are you now immersed in GiraffePad, or you still like to do the old day job?
Do you know, it's got so busy over the last couple of years, I kind of had to let my training business go, but I've still got some clients that were just too good to let go, too good to work. And the other advantage of running the odd program as well is that it keeps my hand in from a very practical learning point of view, because from the one side, it's reminding me what it's like to work with a group of people and to keep those
Mm.
skills fine. But also I use GiraffePad for it, and it reminds me not just from my demos and testing it, but what it's like in the real world of using it with learners, which really helps feed back into our roadmap as well. So yeah, I keep my hand in, but nowhere near as much as I used to.
And I think that for me is the joy about the whole idea of considering something different, because often as trainers we don't realize that there's other options out there for that learning journey. And if we can have happy, fulfilled, engaged learners who find it really easy to get on board, it's a win-win for all of us, isn't it?
It is, and it's like you said, you do some sales training, you understand from a business point of view. However we are as facilitators, we need to make sure we're adding value to our clients all the time, so we don't get replaced by technology. And we have to keep reinventing ourselves, or professionalizing ourselves, making ourselves
Mm.
add the most possible value, so that our clients not only recommend them to other people, but also
Yeah.
come back, work with another group of people, work with our next cohort of managers, work with our next cohort of salespeople. Don't we want to keep going with them? So,
well, I've really enjoyed our chat today, and I've just realised the time. I've got one last question for you that I have to ask you, and I've not asked you this before, and I bet you've been asked it lots. Why GiraffePad?
yeah, we do get asked it a lot, and it's interesting you mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation. You mentioned about SEO, and in the early days, my co-founder, who's the tech side of GiraffePad, really bemoaned at me about the name. He said no one's ever going to search for giraffe in terms of learning. In a nutshell, I'd had the idea for years. I pushed myself to design it whilst I was out in Nairobi at one of my amazing clients, which is Giraffe Manor, which is a boutique hotel in Nairobi where the giraffes come and put their heads in through the windows and you get hand-fed at breakfast. It's amazing.
Oh,
Google Giraffe Manor, and it's the most Instagrammed hotel in the world. The experience.
I want to go. I so want to go.
And so while I was there and I was mapping out the idea, I could look around and just see these giraffes stretching their necks everywhere. And of course, the main element of GiraffePad is it stretches out the learning experience. And I couldn't think of a really obvious name like Training Pad, for example, and GiraffePad was born, and that's where the name came from. Just the idea of stretching, and let's face it, giraffe is the most beautiful animals in the world. So,
oh, I do. You've totally got me now, because we did our first safari before we had our son, and driving through this reserve and seeing these stunning animals and the gentleness and the beauty. And I think on that note, I think we'll finish for today. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely educational and useful. And what I'll do is I'll pop your contact details in the comments for anybody who wants to get in touch and have a chat.
Thank you, Karen. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.